All right. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Slobodan, and I'm going to give you a little bit more information about the TIMO challenge today, which is going to basically give you more information about the small project that you have to conduct as a part of the course. Today's agenda basically starts with this 45 minutes presentation of the short briefing about how your project is supposed to look like, and which takes place here, as we're all present here, and after which we're going to take a break, and then we're going to have two challenges being presented in two different rooms. So in the first one, so in this one, there will be one challenge presented, and the other room will be in the building 306, room 31. After which, depending how the presenters of the challenges are about to give you the presentation, how do they prefer to give you the presentation, you can jump in and ask the questions that are relevant for your project. But we're going to come to that part as well. So in this room, you're going to, for those who are interested in this part of the challenge, the DPA, the presenter of the DPA company, Steven, is going to give his presentation, while in the building 306 for the company Howdy, Rasmus is going to give another presentation of their challenge that the company is facing. So you probably all know that this presentation is not for nothing, so you have to do some work in order to gain some parts of the points for the course, which means that in the groups that you probably set up yourself, you have to start writing and actually to write the particular project. All about this part of the challenge and the presentation is about the structure of the report that you have to make yourself. And I'm going to give both information about the technicalities of the report, how it's supposed to look like, what are the elements it's supposed to consist of, but besides of that also, how would you have to fill out each of these parts of the project to answer the research question and also to be academic in the way you have to be as your students. So the number of pages that you have to have in your reports doesn't have to, actually is not, let's say, allowed to exceed 20 pages, including all the elements. The margins, it's actually all this information are also uploaded on Inside, and you can also find all the details in the meanwhile when you come up to make the project. So top and bottom margins should be 2 centimeters, while left and right margins should be 3 centimeters, and all the text should be written in the Times New Roman size 12 with a 1.5 line in between the two lines of the text. So this is just the technicalities. Since each of the groups are probably going to stumble at the moment and urge for some questions during the writing of the project reports, you're going to be assigned to individual teaching assistants who are going to help you out with your projects. If you have some questions, you can always ask them. And you are, in general, recommended to set up 2 appointments with them, to meetings that are not actually mandatory, but it's always good to have some feedbacks gained from them in order to continue sort of working with the project in the right way. So these meetings cannot be set up in a consecutive manner, which means that you cannot set up 2 meetings at a time. It's just one that is allowed to be given as a time slot from the teaching assistant assigned to you. Very important is that the teaching assistants are not doing the marking of your projects, but it's the teachers who are doing the grading of your final reports. This is just the brief info about this. And you know that it's very important that you understand that the process of writing the project as a scientific part of the discussions you have to conduct to get the to come up with a grade is a process that would take up around 1.5 months from now. While in the meanwhile, before you hand in your final reports, you have to, in 2 week time, there will be a feedback session which takes place on the 11th of April between 9 and 1 in the morning and afternoon. So it's a feedback session where both teachers and or representatives from the companies or our guests that are going to give you the presentation of the challenges their companies is facing is basically going to give you the feedback on the idea of your project, which means that in the reports you have to sort of start you have to start already working with the reports, with the projects straight away, and start constructing the problem formulation and the research question and the idea of how you're supposed to basically answer the problem that the company is challenging at the moment. It's very important that you use this particular opportunity for your projects to basically get as much as possible information to it and to manage to get a feedback on whether you understand the problem that you identified that a company has and address it correctly within your reports. For the feedback session, you always have you will also have some expectations in a technical manner, which means that you are expected to make the submission of 1 slide of the problem formulation and of the report itself, what it is expected to consist of, and how you intend to approach the analysis and also the answer, to provide the answer to the particular challenge that a company is facing, which has to be submitted to these 2 days before. We have the feedback session, which means that you have to submit only 1 page of a PowerPoint by noon. And it has to be submitted on inside. So you're not expected to hand in the hard copy to the secretaries. It's just it's only on the inside. You will be given 3 minutes for this to present what you have come up with, how your problem is structured, how you intend to approach to make the answer to the problems, and also what kind of models and theories you're planning to apply within the problem. It's important for you to be ready for this session because 3 minutes time sometimes may sound to be short or long. You have to be ready to address what are the current issues and what are the challenges that you are facing during the process of developing the project, so you can get the good feedback to continue working in the right way. Besides of that, you will be given 2 minutes feedbacks from or comments from teachers and company guests, if possible, based on which you're going to continue on working with your own reports, and which basically have the deadlines on the 2nd of May, noon. So it means that basically in a month and a half from now, your project is supposed to be ready and handed in particular way. And that way basically means that first of all, you need to hand in 3 hard copies, which is different from the feedback session when you're going to have to hand in only the digital copies of the idea of the project. So the final projects include 3 hard copies and are supposed to be delivered at the TIMO secretary, Christine Lautrup, and she sits in, if I assume that most of you know that she's in the building 424 in room 112. So the deadline is 2nd of May. Besides of that, you also have to deliver or upload the PDF copy, also at the ETU Insight platform. And each of the files that you're submitting or handing in within the insight supposed to be consisting, so the name or name of the file has to contain this, the company, the class you're attending, and the team name, which means that, for example, if you're planning to attend the challenge that will be given by Howdy company, then you have to start the name of the company, say the name of the file with Howdy, then this is a TIMO class, and then who are the people that are working together on the report, and finally, if you have the name of the group you're working with, if you just give the name of the group yourself. This is just the technical part. Any questions? Nice. So the guidelines for the report, yeah. Let's take the yeah. So the guidelines for the report. So the report, as we mentioned, should not exceed the number of pages of 20, which basically means that you have to navigate across these 6 individual elements that your project is supposed to contain. At the beginning, this 20 pages means that everything has to be included, which means also the front page, the literature, and everything. So the front page is 1 page. Then the table of content, also 1 page. We have to see the structure of your projects. Then the part 1 is where you, in the part 1 you have to present the situation, the key problem or the problems that you have identified through the challenge that you have heard on today's presentation. On the part 2, so it has to contain, let's say, 2 to 3 pages. In the part 2, you have to state the retrospective analyses and causal explanations. We will come up to that point, but that part, in technical sense, has to not exceed number of pages 5 to 7. Between 6 to 8 pages of the project has to be dedicated to prospective analyses, and finally, conclusions and recommendations, 3 to 4 pages. The initiation of the project structure, as you can see, is that you have to identify basically the problem, to make the understanding of the problem from the theoretical perspective and everything that you have learned from the curriculum. And you have to approach the future perspective of the project in order to understand what is it all about that might happen. And finally, you have to come up with your conclusions and the possible and potential solutions that a company might basically do in order to overcome the challenge they are facing at the moment. At the front page of your project, you have to include the following information. So basically, at the beginning, you need to state what the company is basically you're conducting your challenge on and writing the project about. You have to state the class. So it's also, again, about the TIMO class. You will give the name to the team you're working together at the moment. So it also has to be stated as one part of the front page. Then the name of the student, student number, and the team members, of all team members, basically. So we have to know who wrote the project, and finally the signature from all the members. Last but not least, but extremely important, that each of the groups on each of the project need to state in particular who made the contribution on which part of the report. So at the front page, basically we need to see the contributions of each of the members, no matter how many of you work on individual reports. We have to find out the information about those ones, the individual persons who were responsible for which part of the project. There are different technical ways in which you can make the presentation of it. And the one of these is basically here. So you can see that you can say that there was a Peter, Reike, and Dörte that worked together on one project, so the 3 people, but we want to know who worked on which part of the project. So you can say that which pages actually were the ones that the individual person worked particularly on. That's one way to present this part. While on the other way, you can also make the presentation of the projects, the project contributions, in a way that you want to say which theoretical, empirical parts of the analysis have been conducted by each individual member of the group. So you can say that, for example, Peter worked on data collection, Reike worked on information search, and Dörte worked on the analysis part. You find a way that you think it's the most suitable for your project, because sometimes there could be some overlaps within the parts of the projects. So sort of the way you organize the work between the members of your group should be basically presented here. It's all up to you to decide and how you're gonna delegate the tasks across the group. So basically, now just to touch upon more the technical, just to leave the technical part of the project beside, and now to sort of discuss what is the content of the report that you have to make. Basically, the aim of the case here is that you have to show that you have learned something across the different courses, and you're able to apply the knowledge on a particular concrete empirical problem. That implies the following. So basically you have to be capable to define what are the models and what are the theories from the curriculum that you studied and you study currently is basically the most applicable to apply to the problem formulation and the analysis of the problem and finding the solution to the problem. This implies also that you have to make the combination of theories and models in order to create the strategy, and finally to present the analysis of causes to the management problem with, of course, some coherent recommendations for the solutions that a company has. This is very important to understand because the descriptive aspect of the project will not be accepted in a meta, because that would not be the academic work. So that's why we have to find as individual groups, you have to find a way how you actually can try to jump out from the descriptive way of structuring your project and making the descriptive content of the project to become more academic. That's why it's very important to apply the theories and the models you studied and you study at the moment to a particular or concrete issue. In the first part of your projects, you have to make the short description of the company, the challenge that has been sort of presented today. But it's very important that you understand that you have to understand that the company not necessarily is going to give their problem extremely open and say, okay, this is our particular challenge. From the presentation of the company and the current challenges they're having, you're basically expected to brainstorm across the issues that they're giving you in the form of the presentation in order to understand what potential problems the company has and identify those problems as an academic problem. It's very important that these key problems is not necessarily identical with the challenge that will be given, and it's all about you to create the problem, to develop the problem that you will actually solve within your project. So that's why the part of the problem formulation is extremely important for your projects. Then, what is the consequence of the present situation? You have to think of that as well. And what impacts does the situation have on 3 organizational levels as a starting point of your project? We will come up to that. but that's a part that is also very important from the managerial perspective and how the pyramid actually works. At the final, you have to identify who is the owner of the problem. Basically, when you're presenting the situation, you have to use, once again, the models and theories where you have to explain the context of the company strategy, organizational design, business models, etc. And combine these models and theories within the data presented with the company challenge. So that's basically the main elements. But what you have to start from is basically you have to identify what is the key problem on one hand, and what are the key problem owners. So the key problem is the issue that the company has. That's their challenge, that's their problem that you have to sort of frame as a kind of, let's say, the research question or the problem formulation of the project. On another hand, the key problem owner, it's not the owner of the problem, the one who creates the problem, but the one who is in charge of making the solution to the problem that exists in the company. So you have to make the identification of these individual two elements in order to start up or to initiate your project from the beginning as the first step. How do you identify the key problem owner? Is basically that you have to identify them through three organizational levels. So where you basically intend to position the problem that the company challenges or faces at the moment. So where the problem exists is where you have to start the discussion. So you have to, I'm sure that you're familiar with this pyramid because this pyramid is pretty straightforward and exists in any managerial book as far as I know, and I remember that back when I studied, is that you need to understand basically that that there is strategic level, tactical level, and operational level, managerial levels, where you have to identify where the problem exists. That's the starting point. Then, when you identify what the problem will be, where the problem exists, and so on, you have to, and when you create the problem that you intend to solve, you have to come up to the retrospective analyses. So which is basically the first analytical part of your project, where you basically have to analyze the current problem that a company has. Retrospective analysis is the analysis of the historical historical development of the problem and what the problem is all about, how the problem is structured, and who owns the problem, and so on. So we have to make the understanding of an issue from academic point of view. So we have to, you basically, through the retrospective analysis, identify the causal explanation to the key problems that are rooted in sort of managerial, business, and organizational issues of the company. You have to, as I mentioned before, as it's a part of your problem formulation, you need to choose the organizational level as your starting point to identify where the problem, who owns basically the problem, at what particular level of the management of the company, and then you have to argue why the chosen starting point is relevant for that particular analysis of the causes. And select and introduce the models and theories, which is the part where you're, for the first time, touching and bridging between the concrete or the actual physical problem that exists in the managerial structure of the company with the theories and models you have identified to be the most applicable for the particular problem understanding. And then you have to make the analyses and outline the causes, where you usually, to some extent, can also apply the SWOT analysis to discuss what are the issues and understand the problems, sort of to make a point towards the opportunities, threats, weaknesses, and so on. So that's basically the that part. But what means the causal analysis and how you basically conduct it, you have to sort of like ask the questions to yourself. What kind of insights do you need to understand, to start off sort of the retrospective analysis? Which models and theories can support this? And finally, how can we relate and combine data and information from the case story to the selected theories and models? The bridge is very important because that's the way we can understand and see from your projects how you basically understand the theoretical perspective of the empirical issue. So theories are in play. Afterwards, when you're done with the retrospective part, you have to sort of switch the angle of looking at the same issue and try to look upon the solutions. So you are sort of expected to propose the managerial business organizational solutions to the key problem or the key problems depending on how many of those you have identified to be relevant for your problem formulation. Besides of that, you have to propose, your proposal should be prospective and aiming and giving you, sort of providing the robust solution for the addressed research question or the problem you have identified as an empirical problem. It's very important that once you understand the problem, once you understand where the problem exists and how it could be bridged with the solutions, is that we have to sort of make you have to make the understanding of how this solution can be implemented in order to make the solution to the for the company. Also, besides of making or developing a solution, the solution could not necessarily be only one, but you can usually apply or find several of potential solutions to the problem and the challenge. But you also have to explain why do you think that several or maybe the one out of, let's say, three solutions that you have identified is the best one. So you have to be, so you are basically expected to be critical in thinking in the way that you understand why particular types of solution relative to the theories and the challenge that the company has is basically the most suitable one. So even though you identify that one is the most applicable one, finding another solutions and being critical why it's not the best one is something that actually levels up the quality of your work, because we understand that you also understand that connecting the theory and challenge and the problem as a triangle is basically giving you a very good understanding of the issue and the problem and the solutions. Yes, and for the perspective analysis and proposed solutions, in order to sort of come to that point, you have to, you can ask yourself the question, what kind of insights do we need as well as we needed for the previous step, and also which models and theories can support the proposed solution. So beside of the understanding of the problem, you also the theories and models to make the solution to the particular challenge, and how can we relate and combine data and information from the case story to the selected theories and models. So this is sort of something that can help you out to structure the solution to the problem. From the theories, I assume that you are aware of the fact that the company, no matter what kind of problem they have, they're always in the way of their approaching to find the solutions and applying the potential solutions to the challenge they have. They always need to sort of balance between the internal and external elements. Where the balance is extremely challenging, and it's always a trade-off between improving of the operations on one hand and responding to new events which are coming from the outside is always the challenge in the way how the company basically is supposed to or should face the issue or the current problem it has. It's very important for you to bear that in mind and understand the company, that the companies are always working in the networks. The networks are always present no matter how we identify them to sort of exist, or if we want to not accept their existence within the networks, it's very crucial and important, because we are all interdependent between each other. That's how and that's why the internal problems of the company is not necessarily the ones that are coming from the inside, but the solutions can also be interdependent to something that is coming from the outside. That's why the solution to your project, to the challenge or the current problem that the company has, needs to be sort of connected both within and outside of the company. Final parts of your project, so all the project needs to end up with a solution, conclusions, recommendations. What does it mean? Is that you basically have to present what have you found out from the project, how would you recommend the company to solve that current issue, why do you think that particular issue could be solved only in that particular way, and so on. So to be critical and to be convincing in the way that you want to sort of inform those ones that are struggling currently, is to accept that your solution is the most applicable one for them. You have to be reflective to the solution and recommendations, and describe how the key issues from the analysis and recommendations are likely to affect the company from strategic, tactical, and the operational level, as we have to be theoretical and come back to the theories where the whole challenge actually has to be about, and identify and outline possible extra information you need in order to implement your recommendations. So sort of it's very important that from this last part we can see from your project that you understand the theoretical perspective and the empirical perspective, and sort of to embrace all these elements into sort of wrap up into like the unit that has a value. Robustness check is very important also for your projects, because we need to understand that you are, and see from your projects that you're critical to the solutions that you have found out, and you have to sort of, there is an assumption that a perception or supposition of how something relates, and what would happen if our assumptions were wrong, is something that it's a critical perspective and critical understanding of the issues and the project itself. So the solution for the company that you are recommending has to sort of be understood that this is, if it's the best one, you have to understand that you have to sort of be critical that is the best one, and to underpin this with information. Why do you consider this to be the best one? Or if you are not able to find, you actually weren't able to find the best possible solution, or find something, let's say, in average, I'm just assuming, is that you have to understand that this is not the best solution for them, but also to be critical and sort of give the brief, the thorough representation of the understanding that the issue could be solved potentially better or not. So if they were wrong, if we couldn't, for example, come up with a better solution, what can go wrong in the case the solution is applied? And sort of to look from behind of the solution and recommendations you have, in order to sort of provide the companies the detailed information about why is it good, and what could go wrong if you decide to go for that. The grading of the project, if I understood this well, so the 30% of the overall grade for your project is actually a part that comes from the multiple choice test grade, and the rest of the 70% of the grade comes from the individual report grade. And grading rules that apply here is that the general rules for rounding up applied as well, but it's not possible to make the rounding on the grade 0-2. Yeah, and there are two requirements for passing courses using a sub-exam. So the first one is that the average of the sub-test must be at least 0-2 without rounding up, and no part marks must be less than 0, 0, which means that that you can continue the course if you get 0, 0 in the multiple choice test, but not in the case you get the lowest possible grade, minus 0, 3. About the re-exam, just a brief information that students that do not pass the exam in the first attempt, they will be automatically registered for the second exam attempt. And also the list of exam dates can be found on the inside as well as the other information. And the final recommendations I have for you is that you have to, first of all, enjoy the presentations of the challenge from our guest presenters, representatives of the companies. You have to listen carefully, of course, make notes, ask questions, no matter how the presenters of the cases prefer to get questions from the from the students. It might be structured in a way that they first prefer to give the presentation and then start the question and answer session, or you can disturb or sort of jump within the questions within the during the presentation. It's up to them to decide how is it going to work. This is the time where basically you can get the most information about the issues, the challenge itself, to construct the problem in order to sort of create the problem formulation for the project work. So you have to think of what the values is the company providing and whom, what pains to the customers a particular problem has. For example, ask the question like, how is the company organized? Because all these elements will be necessary for the project. So start thinking now about what could be potential idea, not so much before you hear the presentation, but everything that comes up to your mind. It's a good opportunity that in the next 2 hours after from 10 when we start the presentation, you write down the potential questions that might come into your project as to be the relevant ones, because sometimes you might miss the very important information once you start with writing your projects. So in 2 weeks' time, I will see you again here or somewhere else with the feedback session. Work hard and think about how can you find the best possible solution and recommend solutions for the company, and think academically in that sense. Questions? It's in 3 weeks. Okay. Sorry, that was, yeah. So it's on 11th of April. Yeah. Okay, so if we don't have any more, yeah, sure. Yeah. Just pick it.
Well, anyway, oh yes, it's working. In the 20 pages are included references?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, that's it, thank you.
So everything is included in 20 pages. More questions? So I recommend that we have then the break, and we'll see you back in 20 minutes at 10. At 10, yeah. So in this room, it's, yeah.